a cargo de Simon Chioini. Chioini es italiano.
Exactly, yes.
Chioini. Ok. De Simon Chioini. eh, denominada Linking Sound and Place, First Experiments in a Practice of Ecology of Sound. Bueno, comenzamos. Silencio, por favor. Gracias.
All right. Should I go? Yes? Cool. So, yes, thank you for being here. I'm super excited to finally present my work. I've kind of been waiting for this the whole week, thinking about it all the time, and I'll feel much better once it's done. I have so many things I'd like to say. And by the way, this is one of my first presentation, doing this kind of presentation. So bear with me. I hope I won't get too lost in my train of thought, but it should be all right. First of all, I just want to thank everybody for this amazing week. Really great event. Morelia is an awesome city, and I can't wait to come back. So thank you very much to the SEMAS and everybody here. It's been a really, really awesome event. Also, I have to thank the OICRM, the research group of which I am part of in Montreal, as a student of the music faculty of Université de Montréal, and OICRM is also sponsoring our travel here. So thank you very much to them. So yes, my presentation here, Linking Sound and Place, I'll tell you a little bit more about myself. I'll present myself, introduce myself, and then I'll talk about the theoretical aspects and the inspirations behind my research project at Université de Montréal. And after that, I'll show you, I'll exemplify the ideas behind my work through first performance I did at Université de Montréal last December, and kind of like the conclusions I've taken out of this experience. So let's go. First of all, well, my name is Simon Chioini. Chioini is an Italian name, so most of the time people don't know how to pronounce it. But yes, so as I was saying, now I'm a PhD student in music composition and sound art under the supervision of Myriam Boucher, who you've heard this week. And I just started in September, so this is all pretty new to me. I'm only beginning my research, and so I'm at that stage of like reading a lot and gathering information and being inspired, but also trying different things and see how it goes. Before that, I've studied electroacoustic music at the Conservatoire de Musique de Montréal, doing the equivalent of a bachelor and master's degree over there on the course of 5 years. And during that time, I mainly composed, very acousmatic pieces, multi-channel pieces in a more traditional lineage of what electroacoustic music is. But there's still some things that I was interested in that I think brought me to my project now. First of all, I was looking into generative techniques for writing music, and this led me to, putting algorithms together, and interaction led me to thinking in music in a systemic kind of way, or thinking of as a piece of music as an ecosystem. And also at the same time, I discovered I had a great interest in the sounds of nature and in the structures of nature as an inspiration. So I've made a few pieces that were thought of as kind of a world of their own, with their own rules, and I was using analog synthesis a lot and digital synthesis also to produce sounds that I thought could imitate nature, and so I did a lot of pieces that way. A bunch of other things I did, maybe I think it's important to mention, but I also have an artistic practice as a electronic music producer and DJ, and I love techno music and breakbeat and IDM, and so I've played in festivals, I've played in local clubs in Montreal. This is like a big half of what I do, and well, I won't go into that, but I just want to say that this aspect of my practice, it's very linked to a community, that music, and I think it's something also that I bring with me in my research. So that's why I just want to mention it. I've been trained as a percussionist also, classical percussionist. I think you'll hear this influence in my music as well. I've been working recently with dancers also a bunch of times, but especially now I'm collaborating with these two great artists, Frédéric Rodier, who you can see on the picture, and Andriane Martel. They have a collective together called Fram, And we've done one work in 2021, and it was, we have very deep conversations about the body and its relation to space, and all these philosophical aspects of like the relationship to the world. So yes, the working with them has been very inspirational also. That our next project will be about walking, the act of walking, and how walking uh, brings a certain interaction to space, how we interact to space through walking. Another thing is I've been hosting lots of concerts and events in the past. This is not something I do as much now, but that has also been very influential on my practice. And during those years, like for example, I've been the art director of a small organization. We've done lots of concerts of contemporary music, especially with emerging artists. And throughout my years as an art director, I was trying to organize shows that would be, non-conventional. Most of the concerts happened outside of concert halls or traditional music spaces, and every time we were trying to have the performance scattered in the place, having the musicians walk around and explore the space at the same time. And this is something that I still do a lot in my practice, and that I now link very deeply with ecology. So that's what I'll be talking about in a minute. First of all, maybe to further introduce myself, I'll just let you hear sound excerpts of my previous work. Um, you'll hear, well, these are albums I've published, and most of my electroacoustic pieces have been published that way. I'm lucky to have my music available like this on the internet. If you want to listen, it's available. So yeah, I'll just let you hear. Those pieces at first were created for multi-channel spaces, most of them. So of course, this is a stereo reduction, but you'll hear all these influence of like the natural sounds, the structures of natures in that music, the percussion sounds also, and well, I'll leave you to it. All right. Yes, I think I'll stop it here. Um, I think it's a good example of what I've done, and yeah, I hope you could hear these influences. But let's not talk about that. Actually, I've moved a bit forward, and I'm not. It's not that I'm not interested in acoustic music anymore, but it's not really what I'm thinking about these days. I'll tell you a little bit more about my PhD project. It's a research creation project, meaning that there's a lot of theory behind it, but also that theory will be exemplified through works of art, works of music. And first of all, I wanted to say that, I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I've been questioning my role as an artist a lot through my studies. And I've always wondered what I could do, especially in the context of a climate crisis and a social crisis that it implies. And yes, sometimes you feel as a musician that you don't have like a direct impact on things. So during the pandemic, I had maybe a little bit more time to reflect on that, and I realized that still, as an artist, we are in a very special position that lets us maybe transmit knowledge in a way that science and text and the traditional ways of spreading knowledge are can't. So through sound and art, we are in a good position to maybe um, adapt a bit of our mindset towards nature and transmit that adaptation through works of art. And that is something that I feel is not really easy to put in words sometimes. So I hope that with sound, I can do exactly that. And I also found that sound has a very special connection to space. Well, most of you, I'm sure you know, and to the environment. So what I aim to do is use sound as a mobilizing force that will bring awareness to our environments, the places where we live, where we work, the places we attend, just like for pleasure also. And I hope that yes, with sound, I can maybe bring a sentiment of care and attention to the places we live in. So through the course of my PhD, I aim to work on four pieces that will present themselves in different formats. The first format I want to explore is performance, live performance. And all of these pieces will be happening in different sites in the province of Quebec. Right now, I'm interested in urban areas and the connection we have to nature in our cities. Through the window right here, we can see it from the ground level, but there's a just very normal facade, and from here we can see from the top that the roof has collapsed and that nature has taken over. And I find this very beautiful and inspiring. So that is something I'm thinking about at the moment, but that I haven't really explored yet. So yes, that's what I'll be working on. Also, I want to say that that's this work. I aim to be collaborative. I think that in this ecological mindset, the role of the composer cannot be central anymore. It has to be, it has to be done in collaboration with maybe other artists, scientists also, and community members, hopefully. So that's something I'll be working on. Also, doing workshop, doing maybe works of music that are made as a group, etc. So yes, it has to be situational, relational. Okay, I'll continue. Quickly, just to mention that, of course, ecology and music has a history, and especially in Canada, well, we are well aware of the current of acoustic ecology. I'm sure I don't need to go through the history of acoustic ecology, but this has been, like, I want to situate my practice in that historical context still. The only thing that I think maybe separates me from the current of acoustic ecology is that in my perception, especially in the early days maybe of the current, acoustic ecology was mostly focused on sound pollution and determining what environments were hi-fi and lo-fi, and it's really tied to a practice of the soundscape and sound walks, etc. So that's maybe not exactly what I want to do, but I'm still very inspired by how the notion of listening has been interpreted and developed by the artists that were working in that acoustic ecology current, and that are still working in that uh, in that uh, you know in that framework. Um, I've also been really inspired by the work, research work that has been done in France in the recent years. And if you follow the L'Harmattan, they have they're a publisher house, and they have a collection called Music Philosophy. And there's great books about music and ecology in there. And one of them is called Ecology du son, and they make a distinction between acoustic ecology and sound ecology, because for them it's more about the relationship that sound has to the environment, but also society and the self. And they're trying to consider all these aspects of sounds all together when thinking about music and sound, and that has been really influential. So there's a lot going on, a lot of research going on in France at the moment, and in other parts of the world. But yes, I have to say that my research is very influenced by them. And there's another aspect of acoustic ecology, though, that I still think is very important, and that has been pointed out by Jonathan Stern. I think he's a professor at McGill University. And that comes from a book called Sound Media Ecology, that is all about acoustic ecology, past and uh, contemporary. And what Jonathan Stern was saying is that the works of art, the music that was done in those years of the acoustic ecology current on the West Coast, they were like first examples of a multimodal scholarships, meaning that knowledge was not only transmitted through text and in an academic way, but it was also transmitted through sound in that specific case. And I think that's very also important because we're working with sound, and yes, as we'll see, I'm interested in seeing how sound connects to the other senses and the whole body, and how the experience of music and sound involves not only hearing, but also the whole perception. And so, yes, thinking of ecology in that way, thinking of music and sound in that way, led me to a very important notion that I still consider a lot now when I'm doing my music, and that is the notion of ambience. And so we know what ambience is. It has been studied a lot by architects and geographers and sociologists. And in music, we even have ambient music. But it's sometimes hard to define exactly what an ambience is, because it's just there, we just feel it. But I have here a definition that I feel is pretty good, pretty on point. It comes from a website called Performascope. I'll just read it quickly. So, the notion of ambience can be described as a space-time that is being experienced sensually through sound, smell, light, color, heat, airflows. It can allow to assess the sensorial dimension of any situated experience and help to qualify the sensorial environment of a place in relation to the social practices associated with that place. And so yes, that I thought was interesting, because when we come in a place, when we interact with an environment, it's not only its geography, it's not only its configuration and the furniture that is in that specific place. It's also the feeling of that space that is important. That's the first thing we feel actually when you come in contact with that place. And thinking of sound also in terms of ambience bring other things. Well, first of all, ambiences have some characteristic. They're indivisible, and they're immediate, omnipresent, and diffuse. And when we think about it, sound is exactly that also. So there's a big connection between sound and ambiences. In comparison, the visual aspects of an ambience is also important. But vision is frontal, and we see objects, but sound is everywhere. We are really immersed in sound, just the way we are immersed in an ambience or an atmosphere. Also, thinking in terms of ambience kind of opens up to that multi-sensory approach, because when we uh, pay attention to the sounds or to the music, when we live that musical experience, it's never only the sounds that we experience, it's also the temperature and the light and the visuals and the vibrations. So there's a lot going on. We cannot only, I um, think in terms of sound if we want to think in terms of an ecology, of sound. All the senses are important in that perception of the musical experience. So yes, ambiences, they engage the whole body, and also they remind us of the constantly evolving nature of our environments and surroundings. Ambiences evolve all the time, and we have to pay attention if we want to notice those evolutions. And yes, there's another thing that I think is really tied to ambiences, and it is a very obvious thing. And I think it's interesting because it shares these same characteristics as ambiences, and sound, as I was saying, also has these characteristics. And that element that I feel is very important to mention, although it's very obvious, I'll skip that definition here, but that element is air. And yes, of course, that's very obvious that without air, we wouldn't be breathing, we wouldn't be alive. But also, air allows us our perception. Without air, we wouldn't be able to see the objects through the reflection of light, and we wouldn't be able to smells come to us, the sounds come to us also, and it allows us movement. We are allowed to move freely in air. So air is a very important aspect of an ambience and of atmosphere. We don't really think about it, but it's there, and I think it's poetically very inspiring to just remind us of that. But yeah, I won't go too deep into that direction, though. I think we have other things to see. Lastly, so thinking music in terms of ambience leads to thinking of immersion, leads to multi-sensoriality, interaction. And I just want to point out that doing this work in sound arts and digital arts makes a lot of sense because we have the tools to connect all of our senses together. It kind of feels natural, actually, to use technology in that sense. And so at that point, I'm still, composing music and creating works of music, but I'm also considering very much all of the other senses when I make music. And to me, this is still a compositional approach, a musical approach, even if I'm using, as you will see, textile to, order the space. And if I'm using text and poetry to also interact with sounds, all of these things that are not sounds are still, to me, musical. And yes, so I'll tell you a little bit more about my first experience, my first performance. It is called Fenêtre Assemblage, and it happened at the Université de Montréal in last December. We have a concert series happening twice a year called Ultrason, and it gives us, the students, the opportunity to share our work in an environment where we also can, try some things out. So that's what I did, and I wanted to do something that would not happen in the concert hall. Here's the site, the location. If you've never seen the Faculty of Music of Université de Montréal, this is a beautiful place. It's built on top of Mont Royal, the mountain that is at the center of Montreal Island. So we have a beautiful view of the city, the northern part of the city. And as you can see, well, that is the concert hall. It has a round shape, but at the front, on the second level, is the heart, the hall where people gather before the concert and after. And this is where I did my performance. So first of all, I was inspired by the architecture of the place. These curves push people towards the heart. And also, as you can see, it has like a modernist style. It was built in the 60s by an architect, Félix Racicot, who did mostly churches. And in that time, it was actually a music school run by the Sisters of the Holy Names of Jesus and Mary. Of course, that's not the case anymore. This is now Université de Montréal, but you see that there's actually a chapel, and yes, it's built in that style. Also, the concert hall has many. It's built with many materials. You have these white bricks outside, but also lots of very heavy metal, very present. There's a kind of psychedelic carpentry inside. I don't know if you can see, but there's like very like intertwined symbols of like sun rays and stuff. It's a lot for the eyes, and also like marble columns. There's the huge window that overlooks the city. So all these elements I think are interesting to explore when you visit that space. So that's pretty much what I did. My first work, I have a lot of big ideas, but I needed to start slowly and build upon this step by step. So the first thing I wanted to do was to explore that space, investigate that space, learn how it's built, how we feel in that space. And so what I did was, well, so research in and with the space. Also, I wanted to use musical space that's unconventional, which is why I didn't do my piece in the concert hall, but in the heart. And I wanted to do a performance that would be like a unique moment, and also a study of different things. So I used modular synthesis for my sound sources. I used the Max environment to do my performance, and also I wanted to explore field recording. I ended up not using them, but I think that the influence of just sitting and listening to sound environments was kind of inspirational still in my music composition after that. At every step of the process, I was kind of trying to ask myself some questions also, like what is the connection to the place, to space, or to the environment and nature, which means like when I did some sound synthesis on an analog synthesizer, it had to have some kind of meaning, otherwise it wouldn't fit with the whole concept. So I was asking myself these questions when I explored every element of that performance. I also wanted to uh, maybe research a bit what was the connection to the body, since our perception of ambiances and of space implies the whole body. Well, that's something we need to consider. And also, in an unconventional space, you need to determine how the public will behave. Uh, or actually, you don't have to determine it, but you have to consider that people will interact with the space in ways that you maybe don't have any control on it. So that's things I've been considering also. And finally, what ecology is being formed with my presence, and while with me deciding to make an intervention in that space, making music in that space, what kind of ecology is being created. Okay, so for the technical sides of things, I wanted to make things a bit complicated but simple at the same time. I yeah, I just wanted to, thinking of in terms of ecology, you think of interaction between different elements. So there needed to be a lot of things, but it needed to work in a simple way also. So first of all, here's what I used. I wanted to spatialize sound. So I had a 12-channel setup. And you see here we have a concentric speaker setup, speakers on the outside projecting sound towards the public. To me, that didn't really made any sense because, I don't know, sounds don't behave that way naturally. So I put speakers, everywhere on the mezzanine. There's a mezzanine that overlooks the first level of the heart. And then in different places, I had like all of my speakers. Also, well, Max as an interface allowed me to move freely in the space while performing. And I use some lights that were wireless lights, LED lights, so I could control the color and the intensity during the performance on my interface also. I used text projections on the ceiling, and it only happens at a certain moment during the performance, so it's kind of unexpected. And when it happens, suddenly people have to look up and be aware that there's a ceiling and that the space of the space that surrounds them. So that happened to be, I think, something very special to that moment. And yes, also like the text in itself has a meaning that superimposes on the sounds that are really abstract. and the meaning of the text was linked to the characteristics of the space. Finally, there was a suspended thunder sheet. You know what the thunder sheet is? It's just like a metal sheet, and it makes a loud noise. So this was suspended, maybe it's something like 10 feet up the floor, and I've put transducers on them to activate the metal sheet. And this also was a special moment in the performance because suddenly the lights would turn off, the thunder sheet was illuminated, and the sound, instead of coming from 12 speakers and being very immersive, came from that acoustic thing that was being suspended above the ground. And the last thing is a textile that I've put on the ground. I'll show you the pictures. It's here, it's bright blue, and it has some kind of flower shapes that remind of the rug and other patterns that you can see in that space. I used it because I felt like craft was also a big element of doing something specific for that work. And after having many reflections on how to use the space and how to consider the bodies of the public, I realized that maybe having something on the floor would put some order in front of that textile on the floor. The public wouldn't go at that space, in that space. Maybe they would surround it, circulate around it. And yeah, so it was a way to control that parameter of space. And to me, this is still in a musical, compositional way, although it's nothing to do with sound. But I hope it kind of makes sense still. You can see my interface on the iPad here, and it's a bit small, but that's the thunder sheet of the ground. Well, of course, it happened at night. The lights were turned off, and so the atmosphere was completely different, as you can see. And I used also, I gathered some rocks and bricks. There's been a lot of construction at the Université de Montréal. They redid the whole facade. So for months, we heard only that construction work, and there's been like debris everywhere. So I took those and I used them in my performance just as a connection to the place. And I think I don't really have time for an excerpt, but I'll show you a little bit more pictures. This is my setup. Well, it's hard to see anything, but you can see that the speakers, some of them are green, they're on the second level. Some of them are red, they were like suspended on the first level. And some of them are blue. It's not easy to see, but they're also just on the floor. So sound came from different height, came from different directions. And all these speakers don't necessarily aren't necessarily pointed towards the public. They can be pointed towards the wall. So it activates kind of like the acoustic resonances of the place. Before I determined that setup, I did some research in the space. Also, I brought a speaker with me, and I just walked around for hours playing my sounds, the sounds I had made for that performance, and trying to understand how it sounded when it came from different points. So kind of like drone sounds, very harmonic sounds, were really resonating, and you couldn't hear which direction it came from, for example. So that was important to know, because then you can't really spatialize it. It just sounds like it's coming from everywhere, and you're really into it. But other sounds that are more like high-pitched and percussive were really easy to point in the space. So when we have sections with a lot of that going on, it feels like you're really swarmed by all these little sounds. All right. If you want to see what the interface looked like, there was 4 parts to the piece. So I had 4 different pages, and they're all brightly colored because I like color, and I don't know, it's also part of that connection of sound with the other senses, So I made it very brightly colored like that. So I have about 5 minutes. I won't let you hear the excerpt because it takes a little too long, but also because tonight I'll be performing something kind of similar here. it won't be exactly the same. Of course, I haven't had the time to explore the space in the same way, and I'm not tied to this place. I don't live here, of course, so I cannot say that I've done the same kind of work. But I'll be playing those sounds that I've crafted on the analog synthesizers, on the multi-channel speaker setup. I'll put maybe a few more speakers if we're allowed, and I'll be performing live. The center of the performance is not me, I have to say. I'm there and I'm interacting with sounds, but there's nothing really to look at. It's just that I'm in the space and listening and trying to interact with what I'm hearing. But yes, you'll see there will have text projections also, and it will be kind of the same structure. I'd like to take some questions. I just want to point out a final 3 things maybe. So that multi-sensoriality approach, well, yes, I talked about this, I think, enough, so you understand it, but connecting sounds with other things that don't make sounds, I think it still is that in that music compositional approach, it still kind of makes sense. And because those other aspects, they influence our perception of sound. And sound as my primary, as a musician, sound is my primary focus, but it interacts with other things. That's just maybe something I'll say. And craft also turned out to be important while doing something, tailored for a specific place. So craft or craftsman, in French it's artisanat, artisanship or craftsmanship. It's not exactly the same word in my mind, but it's this idea of doing something unique out of your hands. And in that context, I felt it was important, not only because I want to do it for that space, but also because it made it special to me. For example, doing these electronic sounds on the analog synthesizers, I develop a certain sense of care towards those sounds, and I learn to appreciate those sounds and have a real connection to them, as any composer does, I guess. But that also happened when I did my Max interface and when I sewed my textile. So all these things coming together, like coming from my own hands, it makes it something very unique to that performance and to that space. And finally, while doing the performance, the idea of a ritual really came up, because when you do something that is not in a traditional context, well, as Miriam pointed out to me a lot of times, going to a concert is already a ritual. You're already put yourself in a certain mindset and you have expectations. But when you completely throw out these expectations, you have to maybe bring back the public into another kind of ritual, which is why in my performance, I tried to slowly build a situation and an ambience. And I hope that tonight you can kind of feel that too if you're present. Unfortunately, time is running out, so I'll leave it there. And I'll be happy to take some questions. Here's a bibliography. I'll show it in a second. I just want to thank again Semas, OICRM, and well, thank you.
Thank you very much. So do you have any question? Okay,
Thanks.
thanks. Okay, so now we have the last conference of the